Hello. My name is Ben Hodges, Grants Manager at NZCT, and I think the first little bit of context that I was asked to share was regarding the Class 4 sector as a whole, and then maybe NZCT specifically in Auckland. It's been a really challenging 12 months for the Class 4 sector. In terms of NZCT's financial year, it started more or less with another Auckland lockdown, and in those circumstances, we couldn't trade, we couldn't raise funds for you, the communities, and then we came out of that. Red light setting, sorry, was not good. Orange heavy wasn't great. Orange light was better. We could start trading again. And so it's been hard, and I think a lot of you would have experienced a lot of declined applications over that period, or receiving much less than you might usually expect from Class 4 sector, beyond our control, obviously. NZCT specifically, we were affected as everyone was, but also there's been quite a lot of competition in the Auckland market, quite a bit of volatility in terms of the venues that any given gaming society's got. And so we've been a little bit sort of bruised over the last 12 months. We've lost a few good venues, but we're still one of the bigger operators around, certainly in New Zealand, and we've still got millions of dollars to distribute each year in Auckland. So we're still a good society to be to approach, especially if you're a sport funder, a sport organization. That's a big focus of what we do. Not entirely what we do. We do a little bit of other stuff, youth development, rescue services, schools, things, hospices, arts and culture. All those other sorts of community causes do get some funding from us, but the lion's share for us goes to community sport. Now, I've also been asked to talk a little bit about what sorts of projects or purposes resonate best with us. Well, I've touched on that a little bit already. We're very interested in community sport, and specifically applications that enable greater participation in community sport, that applications that help remove barriers for participation in sport. So we're less interested in applications for talent development or the best players in your club or organization, the talented few. We're more interested in supporting the many, typically kids as well, as even better, because that gets more people participating and enjoying sport. We invest in sport not because we like sport, we do, but it's because of what it brings to communities. It brings communities together. It teaches children life skills and helps develop them as people. And that's really why we invest in community sports. So if you come to us for a purpose which is more about that, first 11 or your best, your senior men's team or so on, or your under 13 elite team, those sorts of things are not going to resonate so much with us as you might get funding for that sort of thing, but it's a better thing to come to us for those broad purposes which are going to help attract new participants or help retain participants in your sport and activity, and also purposes that just help your organization be sustainable for the future. And I think I'm sort of jumping around here a little bit, but another question I was asked to respond to was what makes a successful application. So in terms of actually application specifics for NZCT, at least, we do fund things like uniforms and equipment, travel and accommodation. We also fund some salaries and contracts, but that tends to be more significant in terms of dollars to regional sport organizations rather than clubs, but we do fund a little bit into clubs. And we also do capital grants, so doing up club rooms, laying new turf, those sorts of things. we all help with ablutions, that sort of thing. Now, sort of stepping out more broadly again, in terms of Class 4 funders, it's really important that you do your research. Not every Pokie Trust Class 4 funder, we don't all have the same priorities. So we've got a big focus on sport. So I think I'm largely today talking to a sport audience. So that's good. But other game machine societies might fund some sport, but have more of a focus on other things. So do your research, and also research carefully what sorts of things each Class 4 funder funds. Not all do salaries, for example, or there might be some other things that they do and don't do. So you can save yourself a lot of effort by just doing that research up front. And if you're not sure, give the Game Machine Society a call and find out. Say, hey, do you guys fund this sort of thing? You might save yourself a lot of hassle submitting an application that had no chance of success from the second you hit the submit button. So do your research. I can't emphasize that enough. Also, in terms of making a good application, tell us, don't just apply for X, Y, or Z. Tell us why you need these things. How is it going to make a difference? How is it going to help with those priorities that NZCT, I'm talking about NZCT now again, but probably more broadly. How will that help your community? How will that help retain, in the context of sport, how will that help you attract and retain participants in your sport, in your code, in your club? How will it remove barriers to enable participation? And how will this help your club or organization to be more sustainable, this grant that you're applying for? And there's a little bit of a balance there, because we're not too keen on handouts, but we are keen on hand ups and supporting and complementing your other revenue streams, but not being your sole, your cash cow. We're looking for organizations that got some skin in the game. If you're talking about big projects, for example, capital projects, it's great to see an organization club that's raised some good funds themselves from their own community. So they obviously, that club values what they're coming to us for. That's important to see. But we do recognize that we've got an important part to play, and as long as you're making some sort of contribution from your own community, that's really important. And yeah, we want to contribute to your sustainability, but not to be a crutch, if you like. And just reading some notes here, one moment. Yeah. So a really big thing about being successful with Class 4 game societies, and definitely for NZCT, is have a good reputation with us in terms of, if you have received a grant from us before, provide good accountability for that previous grant, so that we know that, hey, you spend the money appropriately, you're timely with the accountability, and you show good practices in that regard. And that's really important. Your reputation is only as good as your last grant that you received and accounted for. So yeah, that's really important stuff for us. And look, just as a final comment, more broadly, if you want to be successful with receiving a grant from a Class 4 funder, Pokie Trust, such as NZCT and so on, there needs to be a Class 4 sector for you to apply to. And you guys can play a really important role in helping to sustain the sector as a whole by sharing with your community, with your club, with your local councillors, with other stakeholders, what difference Class 4 funding makes for your organisation. People need to understand about the positive outcomes of the funding model. So use your communication channels, your website, your collateral, or whatever it is, to give visibility to your Class 4 funders. I can't emphasize how important it is because without that community mandate around the Class 4 funding model, it'll go. Councillors will, already in Auckland, there's a sinking lid policy, which means that when a venue closes, those machines are not allowed to be replaced somewhere else. So that's because councillors didn't understand the value of the model to sports sector and the more broader community. look across New Zealand, $300 million a year of Class 4 funding goes into community good. So no one's given it a good explanation as to how they would replace it if that money disappeared. So if you value Class 4 funding, please advocate for that model whenever you get the opportunity. Really appreciate it. So that's all I've got in terms of notes. If is there some questions, extra questions I can be answering?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. That was very informative. One question I do have is, if it's a club which is affiliated to a school, let's say a Walker Armour club at a school, they don't have a separate registration. What's the process like for them? Similarly, for others which are not registered as an incorporated society or a charitable trust, let's say they are registered as an Inc. How do you? What's the process like for that kind of club or organization?
So you're touching on by law, the legislation we operate under, we can only return funds to legal entities that are incorporated societies, or charitable trusts, or one or two other sorts of legal entities, non-profit entities. There are ways to work around that. If you've got an umbrella organization that is an incorporated society, or has that legal structure of some sort, such as a school, as long as the school is the applicant, and the school would receive the grant, if it was awarded, would receive the money, and they would be held accountable for that. And then they can and then whatever it is you're applying for, the boat or whatever it might be, you've got the use of it, but it's the school that have been held accountable for the proper expenditure of the grant. So that we see that from time to time, and that's fine.
Okay, cool. And another question I did have, and this is from the free registered questions, is if it's an infrastructure related funding application, let's say restoration of club rooms or just rent, how is that looked at by yourself?
Yep, we do make a number of grants every year in that sort of capital space. And across Auckland, we've done that. So, yep, it's definitely something we look at. I couldn't tell you exactly what the ratio is. It might be about 15% or 20% maybe some years in terms of the amount of money going into that share of our grants we make each year. So that's definitely something you can approach us with. The important thing to remember is that asset that you're looking to improve, that building or whatever, it does need to be owned by the organisation that's applying to us. We also have some, if you are looking to do that and want to approach us, do get in touch with me, because we've also got just one or two other little things you need to do for us in the process that isn't on the standard application form. So you're welcome to get in touch with me.
Yeah, the big takeaway that I am taking from here is, for any questions, do get in touch with NZCT or even ourselves, people, where we can clarify and then submit, rather than submit and then clarify.
Yeah, actually, I'll just one thing, Sam, that you might be referring to later. Important thing to remember in terms of successful application is to make sure that the Game Machine Society that you're wanting to approach actually has a presence in your area is quite important. What is defined as an area varies from funder to funder, but that's an important, because it's important for the model, the Class 4 model, that we return money back into the same community that's raised it. And as I say, that idea of what that community is a bit porous, but is a bit a bit indistinct. But yeah, if there's no machines from that society, they've got ones in Invercargill, but none in Auckland, you don't really have much chance of being successful. So cool. That's an extreme example.
All right, so I open up the floor to everyone. I can see one question, which is travel and accommodation internationally. So do you have an answer for that, Ben?
Yep, no is the answer. We don't fund that. The domestic legs we might be able to do, but international travel, yeah, and it's not something we tend to do, no.
Cool. Any other questions before we let Ben go? He has to go for a very worthy cause. He has to take his child to football training, so which is exactly what all of us here are here to promote. So if I don't see any other, there is one. Do you fund lease?
Yeah, I can see them here too, Sam. The occasionally it's a lower priority basically, and on rare instances it does happen. There are better things you'd be coming to us for, higher percentage chances of success with other things, those uniforms, equipment, travel accommodation, domestic travel and accommodation, capital grants and so on. They're better things to come to us for. Overheads not so much. Yep, and there's another question here about if you have reserves, how much would we expect to contribute? I mean, that depends case by case. I can't really give you a steer on that. You may have reserves earmarked for other things and so on. So it's really a case, I can't answer that, but you would expect to see some contribution, whatever that means.
Before we head to the next speaker, I'll talk about something that Ben was referring to. The different machines in your area. So two of my colleagues, Marlo and Scott here, have come up with a very useful funding map. I've put down the link in the chat box. Unfortunately, our website's down today. It's picked the worst time to be down, but I will share with you what it looks like. And then take a look, perhaps tomorrow morning, keep that link with you. So it looks like this. It goes local board by local board, and gives you an overview of all the presence of all the funders in your region. So if you find a funder, just click on them and it'll take you to their priorities and their application process. And if you still have questions, then do get in touch with us. Unfortunately, this is only for the Sport Auckland region. Anybody who's from outside of Sport Auckland region, get in touch with us or your local RST, and they'd be able to give you a steer on how you should proceed. Again, apologies, our website isn't particularly well behaved. It is chosen the worst time to be down. Otherwise, this is uploaded on our website. The link's in the chat box, so keep that with you. Come back later and take a look.